I've always been a fan of the Asia House engagement with arts and literature. I used to live nearby. I've attended lots of different events here. I think I've actually spoken here before, and I just have always found it an enchanting space, and I find that the events attract such an engaged audience. It's just, I think, one of the really special literary organizations and festivals of London. The origin of it, I think, for me emerged watching the media coverage of ISIS unfold in 2014, 2015. I was living in the UK at the time, but I watched it from a perspective of someone who was a Middle East correspondent who had covered the region for so many years. And I thought it was bewildering how the conflicts that I had covered for so long that stayed very discreetly in the region were spilling out, and how young people in Europe felt that it had something to do with them. So it was partly to try and understand that for myself and to connect, the life I was living as a Muslim person living in the West with, these stories that I knew were very much embedded in the politics of the Middle East. So to try and make that intelligible and also try and understand why women were so central to that story. I'm always drawn to the story of Nora, and I start the book with her because I think what she experienced kind of encapsulates the theme of exclusion that among all the different societies and places that drew women, it seemed to be the one experience or the one factor that they had in common. So Nora was a 13-year-old Tunisian girl when the book opens with her. She was growing up in Tunisia before the Arab Spring Revolution, so it was quite a secular dictatorship, and she went to school one day deciding to put on a headscarf, and of course in that time in Tunisia wearing a headscarf was banned in universities and in public spaces, and it was really quite impossible to participate in public life as a visibly religious woman and a young woman. So she was thrown out of school, she was slapped by her teachers, she ended up being a high school dropout. And in the course of what unfolded in Tunisia after the revolution, which kind of saw the emergence of this kind of very vibrant Islamist peaceful activism and then a spectrum of it which was more radical, Noor got caught up in that. And when it seemed as though the kind of pathways that had opened up had closed again, she was quite vulnerable to the message that ISIS was sending out to so many different places and targeting women in particular, that look, with us you will have an opportunity that's denied to you, whether in your European homeland or under your repressive Arab dictatorship. So I think that story of a young woman, kind of her political awakening, her desire for an education and how it was thwarted, I think is revelatory. So she stays with me. More than anything, that these are still human beings, and if we want to perhaps rehumanize them enough to try and understand their motivations, I think we can derive lessons that will be important in preventing the next iteration of ISIS, whatever new form, whatever emerges to tap into those same frustrations and desires that ISIS exploited so readily, because those haven't gone away. There will just be something else that will come in to try and manipulate or exploit them. So understanding the frustrations, desires, hopes in many instances of young women across all these different societies, and to see fundamentally that as a human experience rather than something that it's been reduced to, I think, which is unfathomable and evil. And of course it is in some ways all of those things, but it also is something that drew so many women in a way that to us seems inexplicable. So I think we need to try and understand that. So next, simply because politics has become so overwhelming, and it's been a very dark 4 or 5 years working on, well, not dark years, but it's a dark subject to work on. I'm kind of drawn to writing a spy novel. So that is what I'm thinking about.